I saw then in my dream that when Christian reached the borders of the shadow of death, he met two men. They were children of the spies who had delivered an evil report about the good land and who quickly determined to go back. So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone, in spying it out, is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size." Numbers chapter 13, verse 32. Christian spoke to the two men, asking, "Where are you going?" The two said, "Back. We are definitely going back. And truthfully, we would have you do the same if you value life or peace." "Why?" Christian looked out at the valley. "What's the matter with the way ahead?" "Matter?" the two said together. "We were going that way just as you are, and went as far as we dared. In fact, if we had gone on a little further, we wouldn't be here to bring you the news." "But what did you encounter?" Christian wanted to know. The men looked at each other and back at Christian. Why, we were almost in the valley of the shadow of death. But by good fortune, we looked ahead of us and saw the danger before we came to it. Furrows of frustration gathered between Christian's brows. What? What did you see? See? Why, the valley itself. They leaned close and almost whispered, "It's dark as pitch. And we also saw hobgoblins, satyrs, and dragons of the pit." They stood a little straighter and looked over their shoulders. "We also heard things in that valley, like a continual howling and yelling, sounds of people in misery too great for words, people bound in affliction and irons. Beside all that, discouraging clouds of confusion hung over that valley, while death spread its wings and hovered over it. In a word, it was a completely dreadful sight, being surrounded with nothing but disorder. The land of utter gloom, as darkness itself, of deep shadow without order, and which shines as the darkness. Job chapter 10, verse 22. Christian slowly exhaled. "While I haven't seen what you describe, it doesn't change the fact that this is my way to the desired haven. Our heart has not turned back, and our steps have not deviated from your way. Yet you have crushed us in a place of jackals and covered us with the shadow of death." Psalm 44, verses 18 and 19. The two men shrugged. "If it is still your way, be that as it may, but we will not choose it for ours." So they parted ways, and Christian went on his way, with his sword still drawn and ready in his hand, for fear he might be assaulted. Then I saw in my dream an overview of the valley. As far as it reached on the right was a very deep ditch. It is this ditch into which the blind have led the blind throughout time, and both have perished miserably. On the left, there was a very dangerous, bottomless quagmire. If a man should fall into it, even a good man, there is no bottom for his foot to stand on. King David once fell into that quagmire, and would no doubt have been smothered if it wasn't for he who was able, who plucked him out. "Deliver me from the mire and do not let me sink. May I be delivered from my foes and from the deep waters. Psalm 69, verse 14. Walking in the dark, Christian was careful to avoid the ditch on the one hand, but the way was so narrow it put him at risk of tipping the other way into the mire on the left. In the same way, if he tried to avoid the mire without great caution, he found himself on the brink of falling into the ditch. In this way he went on. The effort brought one sigh after another, for besides the dangers of the ditch and the quagmire, the path was so dark that he often couldn't see where his next step would land. Now, in about the middle of this valley, I observed the mouth of hell. It stood hard against the narrow way. When Christian saw it, he wondered what he should do because of the flames and smoke that poured from it, not to mention the sparks and hideous noises. These things had no respect for Christian's sword, such as Apollyon had shown. He was forced to put up his sword and take another weapon, called all prayer. With all prayer and petition, pray at all times in the Spirit, and with this in view, be on the alert with all perseverance and petition for all the saints. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 18. Christian cried out in my hearing, saying, O Lord, I beg you to deliver my soul. Then I called upon the name of the Lord. O Lord, I beseech you, save my life. Psalm 116, verse 4. So Christian went on like this a long time as he continued on the way. Yet the flames still reached towards him, while doleful voices continued their unsettling calls and rushed back and forth, to the point that he sometimes thought he would be torn in pieces or trampled upon like mire in the streets. He made slow progress over several miles, surrounded by these frightful sights and dreadful noises. He finally reached a place where he thought he heard a group of fiends approaching to meet him. He stopped. His thoughts raced as he tried to figure out the best thing to do. He played with the idea of turning back, but then again he thought he might be halfway through the valley by now. He remembered how he had already overcome many perils, and that the dangers of going back might be much more than those going forward. So he made up his mind to go on. Yet the fiends seemed to draw nearer and nearer to his location. When it seemed they were almost on him, he cried out with a most fervent voice, I will walk in the strength of the Lord God. With that, the fiends drew back and came no further. One thing I shouldn't forget to mention is how poor Christian looked so confused. As I watched him, it was like he didn't even know his own voice. Just when he came to the mouth of the burning pit, one of the wicked ones sneaked up behind him. It whispered softly into his ear with many suggestive and distressing blasphemies. Christian thought these blasphemies had originated in his own mind, and it troubled him deeply. As he continued on his journey, the thought that he could possibly blaspheme the one who loved him so much weighed heavily on him. In fact, it tested Christian more than anything he had met with before. If he could have helped it, he would not have done it. But he didn't have the foresight to either stop his ears or to understand the real source of these blasphemies.